Yes, thank you. Then I would like to make my presentation by the title of Comparison of Railway Operation between Japan and EU countries. This is the outline of my presentation. Firstly, I will explain the transport market and outline of railways in Japan. In section 2, vertical separation, that is the public sector's financial support for construction project will be explained. In section 3, I will explain vertical separation for unprofitable railways. Then in section 4, I will explain about the characteristic of railway operation in Japan and compare the railway operation between Japan and Europe. In the final section, I will address the current issues which Japanese railways are facing. Before starting, I will explain what is vertical separation of railways. As the figures on the slide show, when the provider of railway services and owner of the infrastructure are the same, we define vertical integration. In Japan, most of the railway companies are operated by this type of vertical integration. On the other hand, similar to many European countries, some Japanese railways are operated under the structure of vertical separation. In vertical separation, provider of railway services and owner of infrastructure are different. And in many cases, the public sector becomes the owner of the infrastructure. These years, vertical separation is utilized when the public sector supports the railways in Japan, and this is discussed in section 2 and 3. However, characteristic of vertical separation in Japan is largely different from the vertical separation in European countries, and this is discussed in section 4 and section 5. Firstly, I will explain transport market and the outline of railways in Japan. This slide shows the outline of railway reform of the Japanese National Railways, which was implemented in 1987. In the modern history, this is the first case of railway restructuring of the state-owned railways over the world. In the following year, Sweden implemented railway reform by vertical separation. However, in Japan, railway reform was carried out different and unique way. In Japan, the national railways put a loss every year since 1964, and the financial condition of the JNR had become very bad. In addition, public opinion against the inefficiency of JNR was serious. The committee thought the reason of the inefficiency was because of the large size of national railway. Then, at the time of JNR reform in 1987, national railways were separated into 6 regional independent passenger railway companies. Regarding the freight railway transport, Japan is surrounded by sea. So, along with truck on the road, sea transport is so competitive. Therefore, in order to lessen the financial burden of the freight railway company and make the company's management sustainable, it was designed like this slide. That is, the passenger railway companies own the infrastructure, and the freight company operates the nationwide freight transport by accessing the track which is owned by the passenger railway companies. In brief, since JNR reform in 1987, the 6 passenger railway companies own the infrastructure and keep the integrated structure. This means that fundamentally, the 6 regional passenger companies must operate railways without receiving annual subsidy. And they should pay all expenditure, which include infrastructure maintenance costs. In Japan, especially in metropolitan areas, we have several types of railway operators. Firstly, Japan Railways, JR companies, which succeeded the network of Japanese national railways, as I explained in the former slide. Secondly, metro lines, which are similar to many other countries. And thirdly, private railways and some joint venture companies between the public and private sector. In large metropolitan areas like Tokyo and Osaka, all these railways are operated by the structure of vertical integration. This means the railway companies must pay all costs, including infrastructure maintenance, and they do not receive the annual subsidy from the public. This slide shows the railway transport market in Japan in comparison with European railways. The graph shows passenger traffic density, that is the average number of passengers per kilometers per day. As the graph shows, the major private railways in metropolitan areas and 3 mainland JR companies, that is JR East, JR Central, and JR West in Honshu, transport a much larger number of passengers than European railways. This is why these railways can cover all the expenditures, including the maintenance cost. However, the 3 island JR companies, that is JR Hokkaido, JR Shikoku, and JR Kyushu, transport less passengers. And there is a large gap of transport volume among them. Different from European railways and many other overseas railways, certainly, most railways maintain an integrated structure in Japan. However, in practice, more than half of mid-sized and small-sized private railway companies are suffering from a deficit. Local lines of JR companies are also in deficit. In large companies, unprofitable lines have been sustained by cross-subsidy within their companies. In general regulation, Japanese railway regulation stipulates that railway companies should cover all costs and do not receive financial support from the government and local governments. However, the public provides financial support for railway companies, mainly for 2 scopes. The first scope is for implementing large-scale construction projects. And this will be discussed in the following section. And the second scope is for supporting unprofitable railways. And this will be discussed in section 3. In this section, I will explain vertical separation, that is financial support for construction projects. This slide shows Shinkansen high-speed railway project after JNR reform. The narrow black line shows the Shinkansen lines, which were constructed during the age of JNR. Since these lines were succeeded to JR companies, they are operated by vertically integrated structure now. As several local governments wanted to introduce Shinkansen lines to their cities, construction of Shinkansen have been continued even after JNR reform in 1987. Black thick line shows the Shinkansen lines, which were completed since 1987. And the red dot line shows the lines under construction. As you can guess, the construction work of Shinkansen requires huge amount of finance. And if the independent JR companies pay these finance, the JR companies cannot cover the construction costs. Therefore, construction of Shinkansen are implemented as public works. And the projects are implemented by vertical separation. In these cases, the public authority, namely JRTT, implements construction work using the public finance. And the JRTT owns the infrastructure after the open of the line. Then one of the JR companies operates the line by paying the lease fee. As this figure shows, the operator is a JR company and the infrastructure owner is a public authority. As the two entities are different, this is the structure of vertical separation. Similar scheme has been implemented in conventional line as well. In this case, the three stakeholders, that is owner of infrastructure, central government, and local government, pay 1/3 of the total costs each. In both cases of vertical separation, how much lease fee of the railway the railway companies pays to the infrastructure owner is very interesting. By implementing the project, because the number of passengers increases, the revenue to the company will increase. Certainly, company must pay maintenance cost for high-spec infrastructure. The expense will also slightly increase. However, the profit of the operator will increase after completing the project. The increase of the profit is shown B minus A in this figure. In this change, the increase of the profit will be realized by the project of public work and not by the improvement of efficiency of the company's management. Therefore, if the public work results in the increase of the private company's profitability, this might be a criticism by the taxpayers. So, calculating by the demand forecast, the increase of the profit shown by B minus A will be the amount of lease fee of the new infrastructure. This means that as long as the demand forecast is correct, because the payment of the truck usage fee pays, excuse me, this means that as long as the demand forecast is correct, the operator does not increase profitability even after the project. This is very interesting point because the payment of the truck usage fee plays a very important function to adjust the relationship between the public sector and private railway companies. In section 3, I will explain vertical separation, that is financial support for unprofitable railways. This slide shows the change of population in Japan. It is forecasted that the population, especially the working age, which has close relationship with the number of passengers, will decrease in the future. This means that number of the railway passengers decrease and unprofitable railway lines increase. So the current management model should be modified in the future in Japan. Facing this serious change, the laws for railways and public transport in Japan have been revised last decades. Even now, the fundamental regulation stipulates that all costs should be covered by the revenue. However, in 2008, it has become possible to start unprofitable railway operations such as light rail, tram, if the local governments has an intention to sustain them by vertical separation. In 2014, the transport policy and the urban policy have been integrated. And the government encourages the local governments to create compact cities with public transport network. This figure shows the concept of the future direction of public transport and urban planning. When people could not drive by the car, people relied on public transport and lived around the station and bus stops, which is shown in number 1. Then, according as the road networks develop, people started to live in wider area and urban sprawl started as shown number 2. If no measures are taken, this urban sprawl will develop and public transport network will be inconvenient as shown number 3. Of course, this kind of future urban sprawl must be avoided. So the government aims to realize the status of number 4. In order to realize the status of number 4, people should live around stations and bus stops. And essential urban facilities such as schools, hospitals, city hall, offices should locate close to the station and bus stops. In order to avoid number 3 and in order to realize number 4, transport planning and urban planning must be closely integrated. And if the urban area of number 4 can be realized, people can spend comfortable life without relying on private vehicles, private cars. We call this direction as compact plus network. And I think this concept can be applied to other countries as well. In section 4, I will explain about the characteristic of railway operation in Japan in comparison with European countries. This figure shows the through train services between different companies in Japan. For example, there are many direct through Shinkansen trains from Tokyo stations to Hakata station in Kyushu. So passenger can enjoy direct trip without changing trains from Tokyo to Hakata. However, one company, namely JR Central, operates between Tokyo and Shin-Osaka, and another company, namely JR West, operates between Shin-Osaka and Hakata. This means that in each section, a single company takes all the operational responsibilities by vertical integration between operation and infrastructure. In order to realize this integrated operation, even in the case of through train services, we separate responsibilities of train operation between the two companies. This means that at the border station, that is Shin-Osaka station in this case, not only the train control for signaling, but also drivers and other train crews change at the border station. Since in Kyushu Shinkansen network in Kyushu was constructed after JNR reform, the infrastructure of Kyushu Shinkansen is owned by the public authority. Therefore, in terms of the ownership of infrastructure, the section in Kyushu forms vertical separation. However, the concept of vertical separation applies to this section as well. The concept of vertically integrated operation applies to this section as well. Integrated operation. We believe that this kind of vertically integrated operation is a key factor for attaining safety and punctual train operation. And this kind of through train services, by separating the operational responsibilities at the border stations, are applied to any other type of through services in conventional lines as well, such as between JR and Metro and private and other cases. In brief, in Japan, many lines are operated by vertically integrated structure. On the other hand, as I explained in the former two sections, there are some lines in which the infrastructure is owned by the public sector. In both cases, a single operator, single passenger railway companies operates on each section, including infrastructure management. This is a characteristic of railway operations in Japan. Let's see the current railway operation in Europe. Since the creation of EU, European Union, following the European railway regulation, railway operation is changing largely in European countries. In former days, in each country, the state-owned railway controlled all the train within the countries, as shown in the above figure. However, in this traditional railway transport, if the link between the two countries was not smooth, the international freight trains delayed. And the responsibility of international transport was ambiguous because more than two train operators must be in charge for the freight transport. Then the EU changed the international freight railway transport as shown in the figure listed below. This type of train operation is called open access. In this type of liberalized operation, one freight transport operator can carry goods from origin to destination, even if the countries are different. This open access policy fits with the philosophy of creating the EU and the single common transport market within the member countries. Nowadays, open access can be seen in the passenger sector as well. However, this policy started in order to make international freight transport competitive against the truck transport on the road. This is the first key point of European railway operation. Open access had good aspects, especially in the freight transport. Certainly, transport volume of freight railways increased after introducing open access. However, there are disadvantages in railway operation by open access. In order to operate railways by open access, more than two organizations should be in charge of train operation. The past research clarifies that there are coordination problems between different entities. In particular, these coordination problems becomes large when infrastructure capacity is limited. That is, when the number of trains on the network is many. This is the second point of the European railway operation. Then, I would like to investigate whether European railway policy can be applied to Japan or not. As I noted as key issue 1, European railway policy has started for promoting international rail freight transport. But in Japan, there are no international rail freight transport. So European background cannot be applied to Japan. Then, as I noted, key issue 2, the past results show that vertically separated operation increases cost, especially when the infrastructure capacity is limited. When I see the railway network in Japan, the infrastructure capacity is limited. Therefore, considering the two key issues, my results is that Japan has no reason to follow no reason to follow open access policies after EU countries. In the last section, I would like to address some issues in Japanese railways. In Europe, the first case of radical reform was carried out in Sweden. The Swedish railway were reformed by vertical separation in 1988. In this reform, the original purpose is to attain equal footing. Especially on the road. This means in order to realize environmental transport, modal shift is necessary. And when we see the road transport, the road infrastructure is constructed and maintained using public finance. Therefore, like road infrastructure, competitive base can be fair when the railway infrastructure is constructed and maintained by the same way using public finance. When we see the market condition in local area in Japan, the conditions are similar to European countries, and the issues to be solved are the same. Specifically, unprofitable and declining public transport, and excess motorization and urban sprawling. In order to tackle with these issues in Japan, Japan should study lessons and experiences from European countries. In particular, the concept of equal footing should be introduced, and the public finance should be utilized to sustain the railway network in more number of cases when they are necessary. This slide shows the transition of European railway policies. As I noted, the original aim which Sweden introduced vertical separation was attaining equal footing between different transport modes. Then, during the discussion in EU, the EU started to put a focus on promoting competition among different operators. And I would like to investigate competition issues in Japan. When we discuss about competition, we have to be very careful what kind of competition we will try to introduce in the railway sector. Firstly, competition with other modes of transport. This is most serious competition, and probably all countries must tackle in order to attain environmental transport. Secondly, competition between the tracks. In Japan, in some routes, different companies provide transport services on their own tracks. This type of competition works to improve the efficiency and provide better services. Thirdly, yardstick competition or profitability competition. The regulatory authority measures the efficiency of railway operation within similar type of railways. Of course, managers of the companies are very eager to improve the profitability of their company. Although the number of cases are limited so far in Japan, competitive bidding is one type of competition. In the Japanese railway sector, we have all these 4 types of competition, and we can keep the integrated railway operation under these 4 types of competition. On the other hand, Japan has not introduced last type of competition, that is open access. In other words, on-track competition or competition in the market. As I explained, when we try to introduce open access competition, railway operation must be separated. So this will change the characteristic of Japanese integrated operation largely. When we consider the background in EU policies, this looks inappropriate for the Japanese railway sector. In the next 3 slides, I would like to consider how to operate unprofitable railways in Japan. In Japan, when railway operation is required in case they are unprofitable, the local government established semi-public railway organization in many cases, as shown in option 1. On the other hand, in European countries, railway operation by a contract with an existing railway is also common, as shown in option 2. Certainly, the traditional Japanese method, railway operation by semi-public sector, is easy to pay subsidy, as the organization is closely related to the public. However, this type of railway operation has some disadvantage as well, such as difficulties to establish a new skilled organization, no economy of scale, and risks to be inefficient by a semi-public organization. On the other hand, in Europe, unprofitable railways are operated by a contract. Certainly, only a few cases of this type exist in Japan so far, and it looks difficult to design a contract between public sector and private companies. However, even in the case of contract by negotiation, this type seems to have several advantages, such as utilization of skilled existing railways, railway management with economy of scale, efficient management by a private companies. So this is the last slide of my presentation. Although European transport market does not have a large number of passengers, European countries established sustainable public transport. Therefore, Japan should learn lessons from the successful experiences from European countries. Specifically, we can learn realizing equal footing among different transport modes, operation of unprofitable public transport via contract, and coordination between public transport planning and urban planning. These are selected references. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation.
ありがとうございます。ありがとうございます。